Good afternoon, fourth graders. I am so happy that you guys are on here and watching the video for writing. Today we are going to talk about dialogue again. So our goal is to be able to correctly use dialogue in our own story to make things more interesting to the reader. So let's review and think back to why we use dialogue in our stories and what it can do. So it can make the story seem real. It can teach the readers about characters. It can show how characters get along. It can add drama or conflict. It can help show the time or setting, which was in the writing lesson last week. And it can really help the characters seem more real and the plot seem a lot more interesting. So think about the stories that you've read before, any chapter books, picture books, short stories. Usually there's some kind of interaction or dialogue between some of the characters because it makes it a lot more interesting. You know, you can use different voices when you read that out loud. People like to see dialogue in the stories that they read. So let's look at the original scene in the story that I wrote. Let me move this over so I can read it. And we're going to read through that real quick and just kind of see what you notice about this paragraph. The next day at school, TJ stood at the front of the classroom as Miss Henderson introduced him to the rest of the students. Will could see him looking down at the ground, and he knew that TJ was scared about being in a new class. As Miss Henderson finished up her introduction, she pointed at an open seat towards the back of the classroom by Will. TJ gathered all his stuff and started towards his new seat. While he was trying to carry all of his new stuff from the school, Gina stuck her foot out and tripped him. All of TJ's supplies went flying across the floor, and the other students laughed. Will knew that feeling all too well. He thought about what to do. Should he help TJ out and make him feel better? Should he let it go? It might be nice to have someone else become the target of everyone else's laughter for a change. Being the person he is, Will stood up and began to help TJ gather his things. Now let's see how we added dialogue in here to this story and see how it changes how you read it. So the next day at school, a new kid stood in front of the class and looking down at the ground. Will couldn't help but notice he looked both scared and tired at the same time. Here's where we added the dialogue. Good morning, everyone. I would like to introduce you to TJ, Miss Henderson stated. He just moved to town from Arizona. Let's do everything we can to give him a warm welcome. She pointed towards the back of the room where there was a seat next to Will. TJ gathered all his belongings and moved towards his new seat. While he was trying to carry all his new stuff from the school, Gina stuck her foot out and tripped him. All of TJ's stuff went flying across the floor and the other students laughed. Will knew that feeling all too well. He thought about what to do. Should he help TJ out and make him feel better? Should he let it go? It might be nice to have someone else become the target of everyone else's laughter for a change. Here, let me help you out, Will said. Gina can be such a jerk sometimes, but you get used to it. Thanks, man. I'm already used to it. It's the same old thing in a different town with different kids, TJ replied with a sigh. So that made this part a lot more interesting because we're hearing the interaction between Will and TJ when he helps him pick his stuff up, and we don't know TJ's name until we actually see Miss Henderson say it in her dialogue. And it added the let's do everything we can to give him a warm welcome. That's important and it helps the story read a little bit better. So I want you to think about your own writing. Is there a place that you could add dialogue? How could adding spoken words from the characters enhance or make your story better? And how do you think your characters talk? That's something you need to think about when you're writing dialogue. And remember, we are writing realistic fiction, so the more your characters speak like real people, the better. Your job over the next 2 days is to continue working on your story. You need to add new scenes and new events in your story, and while you're adding these new things, you also need to go back and look at what you've already written. Add in dialogue where you can show your characters interacting with each other, talking to each other. Tomorrow, which will be Tuesday, you will submit a scene from your story where your characters are using dialogue. Remember, we should be continuing to work on the same story and adding new material. It shouldn't just be the same paragraph or the same scene over and over again. By now, we should be getting close to have a complete story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Thank you guys for listening and watching this video, and make sure you guys are working really hard on those stories.